Welcome to the Blue Mouse Knits. Today I'm going to teach you how to knit this really beautiful colorwork pumpkin cowl. This is a super simple stranded colorwork pattern. So it uses two different colors. You're going to need one for your main color, which is your background, and one for your contrasting color, which will become your pumpkins. This pattern will be available for free on Ravelry, and you can purchase it on Etsy if you want to support the channel. It uses worsted weight yarn and a US 5 needle. You'll need 120 yards of your main color and 105 of your contrasting color, and that's pretty much it. So let's get started. So for my sample cowl, I worked the ribbing in my contrasting color. The red here is my main color and the gold is my contrasting color. If you don't want the kind of striped look, then you want to work this in your main color. If you want your ribbing to kind of cinch in more, you can use a needle size that is 1 or 2 sizes smaller than your gauge needle. Like here you can see that the top of my ribbing does not cinch in at all. So if you want it to be kind of curved in at the top and bottom, use a smaller needle for the ribbing and then switch over to a larger needle when we begin our repeat. You can cast on any amount as long as it's a multiple of 8 stitches. So if you want a wider cowl, just add a multiple of 8 stitches. If you're using the invisible join in the round method, you'll need 1 extra stitch. I'm going to use a long tail cast on, but you can use any cast on that you prefer. So here I have 129. After the join, we'll have 128. Make sure that your cast on stitches are not twisted. So you can see here that nothing is twisted. And to do the invisible join in the round, we're going to slip the first cast on stitch from our left needle to our right needle. So your right needle has the tails attached and the other one doesn't. So you're going to slip 1 stitch as if to purl from the left needle to the right. And now we're going to pull the second stitch on the right hand needle, which is our last cast on stitch, over the slip stitch and off. So go ahead and pick it up, pull it up, over, and off. And then you can pull on your 2 tails to tighten it up. And now you should have 1 less stitch. So I have 128 stitches. Grab a stitch marker and place it on your needles. So go ahead and work in your rib stitch pattern, either 2x2 or 1x1 rib, for about an inch or so. So for my sample, I knit my ribbing in the contrasting color, the color that will become your pumpkins. And now we're going to join our main color, which is kind of our background color. So wrap the yarn around a finger on the opposite hand that you hold your yarn in. So I hold the yarn in my left hand, so I'm going to wrap it around a finger on my right hand. So just wrap it around enough times that you'll have a tail to weave in. Now pick up your knitting, go ahead and work for a little bit. And then after you have a few stitches, you can release your tension yarn and drop that down. We'll weave that in later. And you just want to knit all the way around. So when you get to the end of your first round, I like to pull the tail to the front, and I also find it kind of helpful just to tie a slip knot just to get it out of the way for now. And now we have our 2 strands of yarn in the back. So what I'm going to do is carry the yarn along the back of my project so I don't have to weave in a bunch of ends. So when you're working your stripe of main color, you can either twist your 2 strands at the beginning of a round every round or every other. So I twist it main over contrasting and then contrasting over main so that we're back to our main color. And to avoid any jogs in our striping, I'm going to slip the first stitch of our second round. I'm going to slip it as if to purl, so go into it from right to left as if to purl it. Just slip it to your right hand needle, and then you can continue with the second stitch to knit. Now our first stitch is a little bit loose, but you can pull on the main color tail to kind of tighten that up, and then just continue on and knit a total of 5 rounds in the main color. So now that we've finished our 5 setup rows, it is time to begin our stranded color work. I'll show you a few different ways that you could hold your yarn, but I'll begin with the way that I do it. There's also something that we need to pay attention to, which is called color dominance. This kind of determines which color pops. So for me, I want the gold color to pop because that's my contrasting color. That's what my pumpkins are going to be outlined in. I grab both strands with my last 2 fingers, and I split them by placing my middle finger in between them and my index finger underneath them. So it looks like this. So this way my contrasting color is underneath my main color, which is what you want. So let's look at our color work chart. For row 1, it's an 8 stitch repeat. We work 2 main color stitches, then 3 contrasting color stitches, then 3 main color stitches. And again, if you lose track, you can just drop them. Grab both with your last 2 fingers and make sure that the contrasting color is on the left and the main color is on the right. middle finger in between, index finger under. I need to start out with 2 stitches of my main color, so the red. So I'm going to go ahead and knit, and I'm going to grab just the red. Pull through. And then I'm going to do the same thing, go into the next stitch, grab just the red strand, pull through. And now it's time to start with our contrasting color. I kind of stretch out my stitches, go into the next stitch, and we're going to go grab the contrasting color, or my gold, and do the same thing, gold, and again, until we have 3. My main color is kind of floating behind those stitches, so I like to keep them stretched out so that the float isn't too long. And now I need to knit 3 main color ones. So I go in, and then they're kind of close together, but I grab the main color from above, go back in, main color from above or the back, whichever way you like to look at it, and again into the next stitch, grab just the red, and that is your 1 repeat. So 2 main color, 3 contrasting, 3 main, and now we start again. So we do 2 main color, so I grab just the red, back in, just the red, finish, and then I like to stretch out my stitches because our contrasting color is kind of floating behind and we don't want that to be too scrunched. That will add a lot of tension issues. By kind of stretching out my stitches, I'm hoping to avoid that. Remember that if you lose track, you pick up your 2 strands like this, and I want the red to be on top, so you can kind of look at your 2 strands like this, place your middle finger in between them so that the contrasting color is underneath and the main color is on top, and then index finger under both. So my gold yarn goes underneath my middle finger, but my main color does not. It goes over top of it. Stretch out my stitches, make sure everything is aligned. I'm going to go into the next stitch, and I'm just going to grab just the gold, which is my contrasting color. That's 1. I need to do 3. So 2, 3. Now you might notice that my main color is kind of loose. There's 2 things you can do about it. You can just ignore it and knit the next stitch, or you could kind of tighten by pulling on the tail. And then sometimes I just loosen up my fingers, keep them in the same place, but just get a little closer to my work and then re-grab to tighten up my tension. But again, you don't want tight tension for this. You want it to be pretty loose. Now I need to end my repeat by working a knit 3. So I go into the next stitch. I'm grabbing the back strand, which is this red one. And then we do that until we have 3 stitches. And my floats look like this so far. So I'm going to go ahead and work 2 more in my main color. Make sure that your contrasting color is on the bottom. If your main color looks like this, just look from the side and grab the underneath part, which is your contrasting color. Just go underneath and grab my contrasting color. And finish our repeat. This is what it looks like so far. Now I like my floats to be kind of loose because when it lays flat, there's room for it to breathe. Otherwise, you're going to have your stitches be pinched a little bit. Now I'll show you another way that you could do this. If it's confusing you to hold both of your yarns in your left hand, so another way to do it is to take your main color and put it in your right hand and your contrasting color and put it in your left hand. My main color goes off to the right and my contrasting color goes off to the left. I don't hold the yarn in my right hand, so this is very foreign to me. But we begin our repeat with 2 main color stitches. So go into the next stitch. You're going to bring your yarn underneath that right needle. Pull your right needle through and then slide that left stitch off. That was 1 knit stitch. And then go into the next stitch. Bring your yarn underneath and over that right needle and finish knitting it. And you keep the yarn on the right side. And now we're going to knit 3 with our contrasting color, and you can just do this normally. So keep your stitches spread out. And I'm going to knit 3 like I normally would. And now we need to knit 3 in our main color. So go in, bring the yarn around, pull through, slide off, and you do that 2 more times. And that was a repeat working with your yarn in 2 different hands, so that might be something that you find a little bit easier. And then I've seen some people, when they hold both strands in their left hand, wrap it around their pinky and then grab with both of your last 2 fingers. Remember that when you separate your strands, you want your middle finger to go between them. You want your contrasting color on the bottom and your main color on the top, and index finger under both. And then I keep my index finger a little bit further out than I would when I'm normally knitting. When I'm normally knitting, I keep it pretty far down and then just like flick it up when I need to tension yarn. But when I'm working color work, I kind of keep it up to maintain tension and to help kind of separate my stitches. This just takes some practice, so I encourage you to just stick with it if it gets a little bit difficult or a little hard to manage. So to start my repeat, I need to knit 2 with my main color. So I go in, pick up my top strand, which is my main one. And now it's time to go and pick up my contrasting color. So I stretch out my stitches on my right needle, go in and go to the bottom and pick up my contrasting color. Stretch it out, and then I need to end with 3 main color stitches. So I go right here, I go around to the back and pick up the top strand, which is my main color. So I do find that wrapping it around your pinky does prevent the main color from getting too stretched out. Whereas the way that I do it, it gets stretched out, but this takes a little bit more getting used to, in my opinion. So you'll want to practice a few of these techniques and maybe work a couple rows of each and see which one you prefer. You may find it easier after the initial 8 stitches to work 3 contrasting, 5 main color until you get to the very end, which you'll end with 3 main color instead of 5. So that's how I kind of keep track of it, is that I have 5 main color, 3 contrasting, 5 main, 3 contrasting, and then by the end you'll end with 3 main color, but that may be a little bit easier to keep track of. And if you're following my method, they can get a little bit twisted up like this. I know that my next needs to be a contrasting color and I need to pick it up from below. So I go into my next stitch, I go underneath the red one. You can kind of see from the side that my gold or my contrasting color is underneath. So I need to pick up from underneath. Just keep repeating this color sequence all the way across. And then for row 2, we're going to work 1 main color, 5 contrasting color, 2 main color, repeat all the way across. So begin with 1 main color and then 5 contrasting color. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then stretch your stitches out so that they're wide enough. My strand of yarn in the back is long enough, and I begin working 2 main colors. So I go into the next stitch, I grab from the back the main color, which is on top of my contrasting color, just the way you want it. 1 and 2. So that is your 8 stitch repeat. You might find this easier is to think of it as 5 contrasting color, 3 main color until you get to the very end, which you'll only end with 2 main colors. I only have 2 main colors. I need to make a third. Stretch out my stitches, and now I need to do 5 contrasting color. So pick up from the bottom or the left side, whichever makes most sense to you. Stretch out your stitches. My piece of yarn, which is my float, is long enough in the back. Go into the next stitch as if to knit it. Wrap around to grab just the main color from the back. And work 3 main colors. Stretch out your stitches. Work 5 contrasting color. And sometimes, because of the way that I tension it, sometimes the main color falls off to the back. I just pick it up again with my index finger. Stretch out my right stitches and continue working my main color. And that's pretty much it. You just work that repeat on screen all the way across until you get to the very end. And rows 2, 3, and 4 are all the same. And then row 5 is the same as row 1, so you can just rewind back to that if you need a refresher. So go ahead and work those, and I will meet you back here for row 6. For row 6, we're going to work 3 main color, 1 contrasting color, 3 main color, 1 contrasting color all the way around. Pretty simple. You're just going to go ahead and start with 1 main color. 2 main color, 3 main color, stretch out your stitches, then go into the next stitch, pick up with your contrasting color, knit, stretch out, and then go back to your main color in the back and work 3, stretch your stitches into the next stitch, contrasting color from underneath, and that's your repeat. Just 3 main, 1 contrasting all the way around. So as you're working, one of your contrasting colors should be perfectly in the middle of your pumpkin, and the other should be perfectly in between 2 pumpkins right here. It's helpful to check as you're working to make sure that everything is lined up as it should be. Otherwise, you may have worked 1 extra stitch in the wrong color and thrown off your stitch pattern somewhere. Now for row 7, we're going to finish off our first pumpkin. You're going to work 2 main color, 2 contrasting color, 4 main color for your repeat. So you know the drill by now. Go in, scoop up the back strand, which is your main color. Do that again. Go into the next stitch, scoop up the closer, or the left strand, which is your contrasting color. Do that for 2 stitches. Stretch out your stitches, and then you're going to pick up 4 main color. So to begin the next one, you're going to knit 2 main color, and then 2 contrasting colors. So you want to make sure that you have a nice long float here with your contrasting color and that you're not pulling too tight. Go into the next stitch, get your closer strand, which is your contrasting color. Do that twice. Be sure to knit loosely, then end with 4 main color. You'll have 6 main color with 2 contrasting colors sandwiched in between. But remember that you will end with 4 main color because that's how a repeat works. And it should be aligned so that the left stitch is right in the middle of your pumpkin to continue the stem, and then there's one just to the right of it. If yours isn't centered there, then you may be off by a stitch somewhere and you should go back and count your stitches. So now that we've done our 7 rows, you should have your first row of pumpkins. So now we're going to do 5 just plain knit rows with your main color. This is the exact same thing as our 5 setup rows. I'm going to twist my contrasting color over my main color and then drop it and continue with my main color only and knit 1 round. After you've worked row 8, you should be able to see the pumpkins a little bit more clearly. They have a little bit of a flat top to the stem. Remember that we want to twist our strands of yarn at the beginning of round when working a big chunk of our main color. You can either do this every round or every other. What I do is I take the main color, I wrap it over the contrasting color, and then bring the contrasting color over that. And now I'm ready to continue on with my next round. And for rows 9 and 21 only, you slip the first stitch of the row. So we do this to kind of prevent a jog when working a stripe in the round. So you only do this for rows 9 and 21. And only for the first stitch of the row. So I go into the first stitch as if to purl, but just slip it to my right hand needle and then continue knitting around. And then your alternating pumpkin, rows 13 through 18 are the exact same as rows 1 through 6. So you can just rewind and watch the tutorial for that. And then row 19 is the only one that's different, but I believe that you can figure that one out on your own. It's just 3 main color, 2 contrasting color, 3 main color, and that's the repeat. And then rows 20 through 24 are the same as 8 through 12. And that's pretty much it. That is how you work this pumpkin cowl. And then you just repeat rows 1 through 24 until your cowl is about an inch shorter than you want it to be. The chart is on screen here, or you can download the pattern for free on Ravelry. So here I've done 2 full repeats of our Colorwork pattern. If you want your ribbing to kind of cinch in a little bit, you'll want to switch to a smaller size needle. You can cut whatever color you're not using for your ribbing. If you're using your contrasting color for your ribbing, you can go ahead and cut your main color, leaving a tail long enough to weave in. And for our first row, we're just going to knit around. This prevents any kind of weird discolored purl bumps from showing up. If you were to begin your rib, you would end up with kind of a funky looking first row where you'd have a little bit of your main color peeking through your contrasting color. So that's why we want to knit our first round. And if you switch to your contrasting color, you're going to want to slip the first stitch of the second round. So we're about to start round 2. I'm going to slip it as if to purl, and then I'm going to knit 1, and then purl 2. And now I can continue in my knit 2, purl 2 rib all the way around, but we slip that first stitch to prevent a jog in our color work. And you want to continue in this rib stitch pattern until you've worked the same amount of rows that you did for your first bit of ribbing. I worked 8 rows of ribbing down here, so I need to work 8 rows total up here, including that first knit round. So I'm going to work 7 rib rounds after that initial knit round. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for the bind off. And once you've done all of your ribbing, you are ready to bind off. I'm just going to bind off in pattern. I'm going to knit 2, and then I'm going to pull the first one over the second and off, just a standard bind off. And my next stitch is a purl, so I'm going to purl it, and then pull the first over the second and off. My next one's a purl, so I purl it, bind off. You can kind of keep the stitch on your right hand needle loose, and that's how you bind off in pattern. You would do the same thing if you were working a 1x1 rib. Just continue working in pattern all the way around. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here to show you how to kind of close up the little bit of a gap that you'll get here with your bind off. And when you get down to your final stitch, you can just kind of pull it out a little bit and cut a tail long enough to weave in. You can pull that stitch out and thread the tail on a yarn needle. And then we've got a tiny bit of a gap here. We're going to connect the beginning of your bind off to the end so that there isn't this weird gap. You can kind of pull up on your bind off to even it out. And now I'm going to follow my first stitch of the round, which for me was this one right here, until it starts to curve. And then there's kind of a sideways V. We're going to go underneath the front loop of it and then go to the back loop of it as well. Looks like this. A sideways V from front to back, go through it, pull your yarn through, but you don't need to pull it super tight. You want to make a fake knit stitch here. So this strand of yarn you want to be about the same length as your other stitches. And then where your yarn is coming out of, on the right half is where we're going to go back through. So I can look where my strand of yarn here is coming out of this hole. Take my needle and I go into that hole, kind of from front to back, pull through. And again, you're only pulling tight enough that this looks like a normal knit stitch. It's supposed to look like a mock knit stitch to kind of connect your edges. And now we can look on the wrong side and weave in our ends. So you can do this however you like. I have a more in-depth video on how I do this, but I'm going to go up a couple of the knit stitch edges. And now I'm going to mimic one of these like umbrella shaped purl stitches right along the side of my knit column. I'm going to go underneath one, the bottom little loop, into the side of that knit stitch. Go to the other side and go down on the right. And then down through the hole that we initially went through. And then we're going to go through and kind of mimic this stitch here. So up through the bottom, up on the left. Down on the right, down through the middle again. Now I can cut it, leaving a very short tail. I'm going to turn my cowl inside out, and then I'm going to weave in my other tails. And I've got this tiny hole right about here, and my yarn is attached to the final stitch. So what I'm going to do is actually go to the top of it and kind of pull up so the left side tightens, and then if we pull on our tail, it will tighten the right side. Get that to be about the same size as the other stitches next to it. So this is kind of a jumbled mess because this is where we carried our yarn, but I'm going to go over to the next purl stitch that I can see, which is this one right here. So I'm going to go up through the middle, up on the left side, down on the right side, and then back down through the middle where I originally came up. And then I'm going to do that one more time. So there's a purl stitch here, go up through the middle and up on the left, down on the right, down through the middle, and I can cut my yarn. You're going to do essentially the same thing for your other two tails. My bind off edge is a little bit more flared than my cast on edge because of the bind off that I used, but I'm going to block the bottom to kind of match it. My cowl overall will be a little bit more stretched out after blocking, so it looks a little bit kind of wonky. I'm going to soak it to wash it, and then I'm going to block it and pin it out so that it will lay a little bit flatter and the pumpkins will pop a little bit more. That's how you work the pumpkin cowl. If you found this video helpful or you enjoyed the pattern, please give the video a like, share it around, and remember to come back to the Blue Mouse Knits for all your knitting needs.